So, you and I were talking a little bit, but before this even got started here is, what is our feeling? We have a lot of questions coming in on, is NAFTA going to dissolve? Is NAFTA going away? Are we going to renegotiate NAFTA? If we renegotiate NAFTA, how long is it going to take? And, I know that, we could talk about this for hours, but if we kind of break it down a little bit, and kind of just start with the draft letter that the president sent, that even once that letter becomes official, which there at this point is no even, at least in my opinion, no necessary stance that it's even going to become official, there's still then a 90-day gap there that nothing happens. So, my gut tells me that at a minimum, we're looking at sometime in 2018, should we even want to start this process.
Yeah, I think you're right, Adam. Because they want to, they have these draft negotiating principles, so they kind of want to align or have getting their marching orders from Congress, and be on the same page, and that could take a little bit to get from the draft stage to something they all agree on. And then, as I mentioned, the U.S. Trade Representative is not in place, so they, in drafting those principles, they'd probably want to deal with him as the point person. And then, of course, you'd want him to be the point person to deal with Mexico and Canada. And then you'd have the step, I think, of, going to Mexico and Canada and officially presenting to them, interest in renegotiating or opening up chapters of NAFTA. So that would be another procedural step. So I agree. You're probably looking at least until the fall before they kind of get their ducks in a row, and then who knows how long it'll take. One thing, though, that's interesting, because President Trump kind of poisoned the well a little bit with Mexico upon taking office, with the way he treated the Mexican president, who canceled his visit to the U.S. by talking about putting up a border wall and cracking down on immigration issues and talking about NAFTA so badly. It really inflamed a lot of passions in Mexico. And, there's a Mexican election coming up next year, and I think it's next year. And so, the left, we're not the only country that has a populist, nationalist component within the population, and so the leftist candidate is doing quite well in polling. And if he were to win, he could be a counter. It could be a lot of it could be difficult politically, or he may take a position of Mexican nationalism that doesn't want to cooperate as much with the United States, and you could have more of a standoff. So maybe there's some urgency to try and move that quicker before that election if you can get these talks going. So I don't know, it's just another factor in the mix. But ultimately, there's so much uncertainty with this administration and how they're, getting policy in place, that, who knows how long it'll take. One other thing I would mention is, in addition to the U.S. Trade Representative not being there, there are parts of these agencies, including Trade, USTR, Commerce, State Department, where you have these cabinet secretaries in place, and then it's like Home Alone, that the Trump has not nominated a lot of people at sub-cabinet levels that are needed to kind of do a lot of the policy work. And so you don't have that extra, that staffing level, that expertise, and the political appointments in place to get a lot of this work done. So I don't know if that's a function of, just being new to this, or a function of them not wanting to fill the positions because they want smaller government as part of an ideological perspective. But that's also could slow things down.
Well, but but we have heard both Canada and Mexico talk that they also agree that there probably is some renegotiation that needs to take place. So I personally think that after all of this, is that I don't think we're going to see NAFTA go away. Do I think we're going to see some changes? Absolutely, and probably some that actually need to happen. But I think on a grand scale, and as far as what is going to affect the everyday importer exporter, I don't think we're going to see as big of an impact as this has kind of been made out to be. And you know, I know you might have some different opinions on some of that, but I don't think that we're going to see. I think there's just, our economies are too intertwined to make some of the whole host changes that have been talked about. Now, you know, you brought up the changes in country of origin. Well, if you kind of get into that and you get into the NAFTA piece of this, you know, right now there's a 7% de minimis that it doesn't, you know, if your product qualifies for NAFTA, there's this piece, you know, that even if this 7% or less comes from a non-NAFTA country, it's just, you know, now there are some instances where this isn't the case, but for the most part, it just doesn't matter. So, okay, so we're going to take that to 5%. Well, I don't think that really affects a lot of people. And I think that's what, you know, as we hear things come out of the administration, I think we have to kind of put this lens on it that says, okay, so they're going to change it. Well, does it even affect me? And I think what we're going to see is a lot of it maybe doesn't. Now, there is this subset you talked about, the softwood lumber, things like that, that sure that, you know, there is an entire industry around that, and it's going to affect maybe one specific industry. But I think some of these bigger industries that we've talked about when we talk about automotive, you know, I don't see as much of a change as maybe has been presented from the politician side of things.
You know, I tend to agree with you. I think that, you know, you've seen, you know, oftentimes it's the last person or whatever that gets Trump's ear that, you know, determines what's done. And I think, you know, as he meets with CEOs and people in the business community and others, you know, and he's pro-business kind of at heart, that you'll see some of this change. You know, plus he really doesn't have a core ideology about him. I mean, he kind of campaigned that way, but you know, so he could easily shift because he doesn't have like some core principle necessarily that he has to stick by. But I think, well,
yeah, so you know, one of the questions was, do we expect NAFTA to dissolve during this administration?
Well, I think you kind of answered that, and it's all speculation, but if cooler heads prevail, which we think will happen, you know, the answer would be no. And now I remember what I wanted to say. So building on what you said, so I think what you might see is, take the rules of origin, like you said, there's a 7% de minimis. Maybe they make it 5%, or they do some little tweak here. You know, President Trump is a master of kind of showmanship or whatever. You know, he'll take some minor tweak to the language, some minor thing that's, you know, any president or anybody would change, and he'll trumpet it or blow it into some massive victory. So he'll position himself to do something to NAFTA that's not that big a deal, and then for his political you know, kind of for the base, he'll translate that into a much bigger victory than it actually is. But it'll sound good, it'll project well on TV, and they'll be able to claim victory when in reality not that much changed.
And yeah, I think you nailed it. I think we're going to see a lot of that over the next, even, you know, with any trade deal, specifically NAFTA, but any deal that gets thrown out there as a potential for renegotiation. I think you're going to see, you know, these small minor changes that are kind of blown up to be these, I renegotiated all of NAFTA, or we did all of this, when it's, you look at it and it's 2% of what actually happens.